Due Process, for the second consecutive year, recipient of Mid-Atlantic Emmy Awards for Outstanding Talk Show Series and Outstanding Public Affairs Series.
Johnny Cochran, love him or hate him, he's still one of the most familiar faces in America. He's not only the most well-known attorney, but he's become a pop figure as well. On the docket for this edition of Due Process, a conversation with Johnny Cochran.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.
If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Rush to judgment. These phrases, spoken by Johnny L. Cochran Jr., have become American cliches as a result of the 1995 O.J. Simpson trial. I'm Raymond Brown, and we're kicking off our fourth season talking with Johnny, a now famous trial lawyer and host of his own program, Cochran Tonight, on Court TV. We'll explore his views on the impact of the Simpson trial, and maybe we'll learn about the costs and the benefits of fame. But first, some news about my friend and the producer of Due Process, Sandy King. In the past, at this point in our program, Sandy would join me for a discussion. But Sandy won't be with us this season. She's studying at Harvard on a Nieman Fellowship, an honor given each year to a small number of journalists from around the world. Sandy's the first ever Nieman Scholar from New Jersey, and she's very deserving of this opportunity. We're going to miss her, and if we're very lucky, perhaps we can persuade her to join us for a special assignment or two. Now we turn our attention to our guest, Johnny Cochran. Johnny and I have become friends while working together at Court TV, but we at Due Process are not the first New Jersey folks to discover him. There is a hushed anticipation as the bus pulls up in East Orange, New Jersey, just outside of Newark. It is the evening of the dedication of the Johnny L. Cochran Jr. Academy of Legal Studies and Community Service. It's an event not to be missed by the school's namesake. Johnny L. Cochran Jr., perhaps the most recognizable legal name in America, makes it a point to make time for his community.
Some of these young children, I say to them, work hard and try to be the best that you can be. Don't get left behind. The judges of the facts. Misdeeds are the worst results. At the same time,
Just over 60 years old, Cochran is at the zenith of his fame. Since winning O.J. Simpson's freedom in 1995 as head of the Dream Team, he's become almost a pop icon.
Cochran, get that Johnny Cochran, not that woman.
Good idea. But I never lose sight of the fact that I'm a lawyer still trying to fight for justice. I mean, that's my first calling.
His call to justice came after a strong family upbringing in Los Angeles. His mother, Hattie, hoped he would become a doctor.
And that was her dream, but he was a kind of fun type person, and so he decided he'd prefer to be an attorney, so we encouraged him.
The fun side of Cochran's nature, however, has never overshadowed an intensity of purpose that has characterized his life.
That wild period that most young people will go through.
He attended UCLA and graduated from Loyola Law School in 1962. Family support has always been a linchpin in Cochran's life.
my daughter Tiffany,
We're a close-knit family, and we normally support one another, and we just wouldn't miss this.
He married Barbara Berry in 1960 while still in law school. An elementary school teacher, she worked while he attended class. Their first child, Melody, was born the year he graduated. His first job was with the Los Angeles city attorney. By 1965, he was in private practice.
You are now looking at Avalon Boulevard, a section of Watts.
The mid-60s were punctuated by uprisings throughout the country. Cochran understood the frustration of living in a world controlled by whites. The LA Police Department was the most visible tool of that society, and there was little accountability in the courtroom, where an officer's testimony was accepted as gospel.
Estimated 600,000 Southern California viewers were tuned to Channel 5's live coverage.
Cochran's first brush with fame came just after Watts. Leonard Deadweiler had been shot and killed after being stopped by the LAPD for speeding while rushing his pregnant wife to the
The
hospital.
coroner's jury
The
consisted of
courtroom
8
was
men
packed,
and 1
and
woman.
the case received
The hearing
unprecedented attention. The result of the inquest was disappointing for Cochran, however. The jury found the officer's action accidental. Despite the verdict, the widow sent a message of conciliation relayed by her 28-year-old attorney.
We may now, from this point, go forward, and there will be no more bloodshed or no more killing or no more disorder, if you will. This is her sincere desire.
Since then, Johnny Cochran's career has been characterized by cases with ever-escalating profiles. He's represented clients ranging from Black Panther Geronimo Pratt to Michael Jackson and Reginald Denny.
When the police officers left this area, they left citizens like Mr. Denny totally helpless.
The march to success has not been without a price. His first marriage was a casualty along the way. But whatever the personal cost, he's never lost sight of his quest for justice.
You know, I'm never in this to be loved or liked, just respected. The main thing I want is to understand that I'm serious about what I'm doing. I'm an advocate.
Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Whatever your belief about O.J. Simpson's guilt or innocence, the case was the defining moment of Cochran's career, the one that brought him international attention and made him the household name he is today.
You look at O.J. Simpson over there, and he has a rather large head. O.J. Simpson in a knit cap
It
from 2
served
blocks
as an
away.
indictment of all
It's still
corrupt
O.J.
police
Simpson.
tactics. This is the essence of the case. Cochran put the LAPD on trial, and O.J.'s acquittal was viewed by some as retribution by jury for wrongs done to countless others over the years. No police department can afford to ignore this verdict.
Police brutality is something that's always has been an obsession of mine since I became a young lawyer 35 years ago. I've tried these cases throughout the length and breadth of California, done that, and now I've got a number of them on the East Coast. It's an endemic problem. Hopefully it's getting better.
Over the years, Cochran has been showered with accolades and awards. His autobiography, Journey to Justice, was published in 1996. He can be seen evenings on Court TV's Cochran Tonight, but perhaps he's proudest of serving as a role model and inspiration for millions of African Americans.
None of us in this audience are free until all of us are free in this society. We can't rest on our laurels. So understand.
Now I'm in law school. I plan to pursue aviation law and public interest law. This is my 2nd year at Seton Hall University.
Of all his accomplishments, though, he might be the most gratified to hear little 9-year-old Amanda Addison, a student at the Academy.
I think every individual should have the right to have justice and be equal under the law.
Are we moving towards equal justice? Is a criminal defense lawyer supposed to merely represent an individual client, or should he or she be concerned with achieving justice? We'll explore those and other questions with our guest, Johnny L. Cochran Jr., when we return.
I think Johnny Cochran is a positive role model for black people, and he presents a good image. And even though I may have my doubts about O.J.'s guilt or innocence, I liked his presentation and his demeanor during the trial.
First of all, I think he should be disbarred from being a lawyer, Johnny Cochran.
Why?
Because he got a guy off with murder.
I mean, he's making a lot of money right now, and, you know, why I would do the same thing. Go for it.
Great lawyer. One of the best I've ever seen. If I want to be represented, I definitely would Johnny Cochran to be my lawyer.
What is it like to change from a well-known California lawyer to perhaps the most recognized attorney in America? How does it feel to have total strangers shower you with praise or, on occasion, with abuse? I can think of no one better qualified to answer those questions than my guest today, Johnny L. Cochran Jr. Johnny, thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure being with you, Ray.
And we'll give you your share of praise, but we got to talk about abuse too.
Absolutely.
That gentleman who I think has never met you said you should be disbarred. When you first came to Court TV, there was an announcement that you were going to have a show at Court TV.
Yes.
And I was on the email, that is the inter-office email that comes in from the viewers.
Yes.
And while there were some folks that praised you, there were a lot of people who said, he's an evil man, he's the devil incarnate. I didn't say any tale, but people really virulently angry at you because of your role in the Simpson case. How do you explain that?
You know, I think that when you're on television every day for almost a year, people form opinions. And of course, they don't really know you, because during that process, I was an advocate representing a client. And it was about the right to counsel. And I understood that came with the territory, that some people wouldn't like you. But, you know, Raymond, it wasn't a popularity contest. I had a job to do, to represent the client to the best of my ability. And, you know, all the people who have these strong views, if they were ever in trouble, they wouldn't want a lawyer who would say, what's politically popular here? What shall I do? Or they want someone who represents them. And that's what we did. So I understood, came with the territory. And over a period of time, I hope people have come to understand that I'm a lawyer, and I do my job, and I seek justice for my clients.
Let me explore a couple of elements of that, though, because obviously criminal defendants are represented in court every day.
Sure.
Some of them on local TV, some in court TV, some on newspapers, and some just known to the community of folks around. And there isn't always that virulence. So part of it, of course, is that Simpson was a criminal defendant.
Yes.
Was race a factor in the level of anger directed towards you?
Oh, I think so. I think clearly. I think that racism is still very much a part of the society, and you and I don't trade on that, but it's a reality. And, you know, and much of America is on denial about the racist effect of many of our institutions. So, but I deal with it. I've spent my entire life dealing primarily with juries who are 99% white. But, you know, so that's America. That's life in America. So race did play a part. I think the fact that many people held strong views because we never before had seen such commentary about a trial. You know, on the eve of that verdict, 99% of the commentators said Simpson will be found guilty. But
I didn't, by the way.
Well, you were part of that 1% because you tried cases, so you understood a jury back that quickly would probably acquit.
So you think it was race, the fact that you're a criminal defense lawyer, the fact that people watched the trial and concluded in their minds that Simpson was guilty?
Oh yeah, I think that for a lot of reasons people didn't want to give us credit for winning that case.
Let me explore an aspect of something you said before about a lawyer's duty, because I think it's an important issue for viewers and folks to think about. One of the most controversial aspects of your closing argument, which is mentioned, by the way, here in your book on page, I even marked it, on page 349, is your reference to Mark Fuhrman and your comparison of him to Hitler, or at least to those who ignored him as those who ignored Hitler.
Yes.
It created a lot of criticism, including from other lawyers. Now, let me give you a hypothetical. Let's assume that you knew for sure that making that argument would make it more likely that your client would be acquitted, but that people would rise up and perhaps engage in insurrection or shoot each other on the streets. What would your duty as a lawyer be? On the one hand, your client, on the other hand, what the community thinks?
Well, that's always a tough question, but probably I would, you know, and I'm not, you know, George Will after the trial said Johnny Cochran's a great lawyer and a bad citizen, and I never understood that, what he meant by that. In that context, you know, I would do probably what I felt was appropriate for my client under the circumstances. As I said, this is a matter of doing the best you can for your client responsibly and ethically. And with regard to that particular quote, as you know, we had Jewish members on the team, you know, Peter Neufeld, Barry Scheck, Bob Shapiro. What we were trying to say there, when evil rears its ugly head, if you don't do something about it, you know, this is what can happen. I think it was perhaps misunderstood. Alan Dershowitz was one of the most vigorous defender of myself in that particular peril. Now, if I had to do that over again, I probably wouldn't do it. You know why? It wasn't that important to the overall scheme of things.
But that's a tactical decision.
That was just a tactical decision. But if I felt that it was necessary to help get my client off, I would do what I had to do. And you know, it wasn't like I wasn't worried about what people were going to think.
Did you invent that principle, or is that an ancient principle in the law
that
you got to go all out for your client?
That is not anything I invented. That is something that I inherited. It's a mantle that we all, you know, assume when we become lawyers. If you're going to be an advocate, that's what you have to do, right? And one of the things I hope the lesson from the Simpson case is that's what an advocate does. Before that, I think people thought you tiptoe around. I mean, this whole thing in the defense of the president is that what's politically appropriate? You know, how do we resolve this?
To President Clinton and his impeachment struggle, yes, and that people think he shouldn't be vigorous in this defense.
Sure, I mean, people are wondering about, you know, in the Simpson case, you may remember this, we would file motions to suppress evidence. People said, if he's innocent, why would he do that? Because the Constitution says you should do that. This should be tested. So, for the first time, I think people saw up close and personal what happens in a court of law. They also saw the role of parties. You know, the prosecutor doesn't have any priority on the truth and truthful witnesses. The defense lawyers are also. In fact, I'd like for our people in America to understand that many times the only person standing between an innocent client and a life in prison or the death penalty is the defense lawyer, who stands there in that gap. And he has the Constitution and little else.
Why is it so misunderstood? Why do so many people who would in theory say, I believe in the Constitution, I believe in the Bill of Rights, become unwilling to really embrace the principles when they're tested?
I think it's for a lot of reasons. I think that over a period of time, lawyers have become generally unpopular in society. At the time of Clarence Darrow could defend the most guilty person in the world. And, you know, he made this great argument after he pled a client guilty, and we all look at the legendary argument and people praise him or whatever. But, you know, time has changed now. Lawyers are now not highly thought of. You know, they're thought of as parsing words, of trying to get guilty people off and that sort of thing. But for those people who say that, you know, I have a real simple statement for them. All of your viewers can guarantee they won't commit a crime, but none of them can guarantee that one day they won't be charged with a crime. And if they're charged with a crime, they'll want an effective advocate who will use the Constitution and everything else for them. And that's what makes our system great. Not everybody should just get in and have a process where the district attorneys have their way. Look at Ken Starr. You see what happens when a district attorney or a prosecutor has unlimited resources, unlimited power, and they do whatever they want to do.
You think people are focusing on the Ken Starr issue and talking about it from the point of view of what prosecutors should and shouldn't do?
No, I don't think so. I think they're probably missing that too. But I think there are these lessons here of how our system works, and people need to take time, and we as commentators have an obligation, I think, to point that out to people to say, look, you want to see abuses? You want to see what can happen? You want to see grand jury testimony leaked that's supposed to be secret? You want to see how a grand jury works? Look at Ken Starr with unlimited power. And I think people ultimately are going to come to understand that. And I hope that over a period of time with regard to Simpson, people now understand it was really about effective advocacy. We actually won the case. Nobody gave us anything.
Let me explore a little bit of the impact of that on you personally.
Sure.
I think everybody assumes that if they got their moment in the sun and got some exposure and some positive as well as negative press, it'd be all chocolate ice cream. Sure. Or whatever flavor they prefer.
Sure.
But it strikes me, for example, people involved in your life in the past, ex-wives, girlfriends, write books, go on television, talk about aspects of your life that nobody cared about before, but which now become part of the public discussion. How does that feel to have your personal life suddenly become legitimate commentary in tabloids and on television and elsewhere by people who you probably feel in your heart of hearts have no business talking about?
It's very painful. It's very painful because it affects not only you, but it affects your family and your wife and your children. And it's probably unfair, but you know, it comes with the territory. If you decide to stand up for something, if you decide to be a person of principle, to keep your eyes on the prize, these things are going to happen to you. You're going to be attacked. You know, one of the things we learned during the trial was one of the ways, Raymond, that you know that you've got a trial of the century is that your trash dumpster is empty on Tuesday, and your trash man doesn't come until Thursday. And the reason
people actually go
is
through
because
your
they go through your trash. They do everything. This comes with the territory. Your home address is put on the internet. The LAPD comes to you at the end of the trial and says, there's so many death threats against you lawyers that we can't defend you anymore. Get your own defenders. Those are the things that come with the territory. Now, is that going to stop you?
Were you prepared for that? Were you prepared
No.
in the sense that you obviously were not an unknown guy in California and Los Angeles, but this is at the next level. Were you prepared to have people looking at the most intimate details of your lives, looking at your American Express bills and the notes you might receive from friends?
No, I really wasn't prepared for it. But you know what? It came with the territory. And what the most important thing was, I was able to stay focused. My mother told me something a long time ago, Raymond, that I think stood me well during the trial. She told me once, after she got over the fact that I wasn't going to try to become a doctor, was that all you're left with after a crisis is your conduct during it. And I remember that during that trial. No matter what they came at me with, no matter what they said, I stayed focused. My job was to defend this man to the best of my ability.
But then let's look at the impact of that pressure and exposure on others. For example, 2 members of your defense team have essentially either been critical of you or even worse, been critical of Mr. Simpson, the defendant, Mr. Kardashian, Mr. Shapiro. I don't know what your current relationship with him is, but I think they've been pretty loudly criticized by other criminal defense lawyers saying you can't break with the defendant and criticize him based on confidential communications. Was it the same pressure of community feeling that led to that kind of conduct?
Oh, especially I think with regard to Bob Shapiro. I think that he went from being perceived as an icon in the community, to really, toward the end, getting a lot of barbs and things. It was hard for him to take, and he breached the faith. He gave an interview with Barbara Walters the night before, I think October 1st, the night before the verdict. He thought we were going to lose. This is the first time he'd ever tried a murder case. Never tried one all the way to verdict. He didn't understand what was really happening at the end. He thought we were going to lose. You look at that interview. And so he was trying to justify the fact that if he had stayed in charge, we would have won. But of course we did win, and that's what happened. So in many respects, that was unfortunate for him to do that, and you know, he has to live with that forever. Kardashian, I think, is still a friend of Simpson's. He made some mistakes in this whole book and getting involved with Schiller. But the rest of the team is very much intact. You look at the rest of us, we're very close.
I don't want to interrupt, but we're running out of time. Sure. It's moving so fast, and that is, you've moved from being exclusively a trial lawyer to also being on television at Court TV. Yes. Why did you do that?
Well, you know, it presented by Steve Brill, who was the man who came to us, and it gave me an opportunity. One of the things that occurred to me is I don't want to be defined by other people. You can love me, you can hate me, you can whatever, but hopefully you'll respect me at the end of the day. But I don't want you to define me. I want you to understand, or if you're going to define me, I want you to understand the full picture. I'm not just a person who dropped down and just started trying Simpson. I had been there all along. This was my home court. This was the place where I practiced law. I understood L.A. County. I understood the LAPD. I understood the jurors. I understood the process. I knew the prosecutors. I had worked with Gail Garcetti. He worked for me when I was in the DA's office. So that, you know, I want people to understand that there perhaps is more to myself than the O.J. Simpson case.
Moving from being a trial lawyer to being on television to using prompters to dealing with a team as opposed to doing your own thing, using your own instincts, what's been the biggest challenge in terms of working in television?
Oh, I think this is tough work. I mean, being a commentator, you know, the constant, you know, you've got to be abreast of what's going on. You've got to be, when the red light goes on, it's like going to court. But yet there's a lot of preparation involved. And I think that what you and I think, try to do is to certainly bring up the views, to help people understand what this process is about. I learned quickly during that whole process. People didn't really understand the judicial process. You know, that judges aren't granted any kind of great mantle of greatness just because they become judges. Police officers don't always tell the truth. Defendants aren't always guilty.
Well, are you optimistic or pessimistic? I mean, your nature seems cheerful, but your words reflect some understanding of the problems in the system. So on balance, in terms of equal justice and especially overcoming the hurdle of race as it relates to justice, optimistic or the other?
Well, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic because I'm an optimistic person, but we have a lot of work to do. There's so much denial. As I've said so many times, Raymond, denial is more than a river in Egypt in this country. And there's people who buried their heads in the sand. We got to remain vigilant to talk about it. Resources. We need more resources in this whole criminal justice field. There's so much to do to confront racism. When you do that in this country, people talk about a race card. You can't trivialize race about some
What about that phrase, the race card? Why is that used? I mean, it seems to be a suggestion that a black guy who is in a courtroom or in a public arena uses race in some evil way. Yeah. Why do you think that phrase is used so widely, and why has it been used in connection with you?
No, I think it's very clever by opponents who want to like neutralize you on that racism exists. But you can't be swayed by that. First of all, race cannot be reduced to some kind of a card game. It's not a card game. It's very serious. And as I said in the Simpson case, that's preposterous. I mean, they introduced the issue of race. They called Furman. He's the one who used those terms. It became relevant because he lied. If you don't think he lied, he was convicted of perjury and got a $200 fine in a set-up deal. So, you know, I mean, don't tell me about that. If you don't bring that up, it's malpractice. I mean, clearly.
It would be malpractice for me to not ask you about the impeachment process. We don't have much time, but give us a thumbnail sketch. What's going to happen? Is Clinton going to remain in office, and what will be the lasting legacy of this whole row?
Well, I think Clinton will remain in office. I think it won't be a trial. You won't see any great litigators there. They'll start the trial, and hopefully they'll have enough sense to end this matter, because that's what the American people want. There really is a political component, and ended without a lot more trouble. I think that's where we're going to head. I hope it's ended within a week or 2 weeks at the outset, and we get on to let them do the business of the people.
And quickly, why does it seem, at least in the House, that so many black congresspeople were all in favor of the president? I mean, is race a factor here?
Oh, I think race is a factor. I think African Americans look and say, look, from a standpoint of justice, if they can do that, if a prosecutor can do this to perhaps the strongest person in the world with the most resources, what can happen to an African American in this country? I think they identify with the injustice of it all. It's hard to know exactly what he's charged with. It's like fighting like a marshmallow. I mean, you know, he's a bill of
but it's a potentially lethal marshmallow.
Yes. Oh, it can be very lethal. He could be out of office and lose his pension and be ousted. I don't think that will happen. I don't think they have the votes for that. But I think that clearly, I think we identify with any kind of an injustice under the circumstances. And so many people seem to be so hypocritical.
And the majority of American people of all colors, though, say, we want it to go away. We don't think it's worth the candle.
Exactly. And I think they fully understand what's going on here. And hopefully, the Senate will listen, and some leaders will emerge. Some wise statespeople will emerge.
So once again, your optimism surfaces. But have there been wise leaders on this matter to this point?
Not really. The leadership has been far too partisan.
Maybe it'll change and we'll watch it together. That's it for this edition of Due Process, but we want you to join us next week when our docket will include another important look at law and social justice. Till then, for all of us here at Due Process, I'm Raymond Brown.
Trouble, would you want someone to represent you to the best of their ability? Or would you want them to say, well, you know, the popular view would be to go run off and do something else? That's not the way our system works. And so I hope over time people come to understand that justice in America is comprised of a judge who does his job, a prosecutor who does his job or her job, and a defense lawyer who does his or her job. I did the best I could in my job. We happened to win. I make no apologies for that. And we move on, you know, and I do the best I can wherever I can.
You know, people didn't really get to know it during the trial, but this is a man who's committed to social justice. His whole practice over time has been committed to social justice, and, you know, it's a real honor that now we are in New York City and we have a series of cases together with Peter Neufeld that we think are really going to make a difference in this area. The Abner-Louima case, the New Jersey Turnpike shooting case, these are going to be major civil rights cases, I believe. They're going to do a lot to deal with issues of police brutality in our city and in the state of New Jersey.
Major funding for Due Process was made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding was provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.